The head of a national farming organisation says there's no point in the state government looking to attract massive secondary industries to Tasmania through its power development program. Mr John Bennett of Elizabethtown said when opening the Deloraine show that secondary industry was not interested in coming to the state because of Tasmania's geographical isolation and the expensive charges for power. Mr Bennett, who's president of the Australian Dairy Farmers Federation, said that instead of chasing heavy industry, the government should turn its attention to coordinating agricultural resources. He said the reality was that heavy industry that had come to Tasmania had been attracted by cheap power and transport. Neither was now available, and the industries already here were now on shaky ground. A major boat builder says his firm could have injected at least another $3 million into the Tasmanian economy if it had adequate factory facilities. Mr Bob Clifford of International Catamarans said there was a worldwide market for his boats, but a number of orders had been placed overseas because of inefficient facilities in Hobart. Mr Clifford said he was disappointed there'd been so much delay in negotiations with the state government committee on a new building yard on part of the old gasworks site. His Macquarie Wharf operation has turned out 8 catamarans worth $3 million in the last 18 months, but orders for a similar amount had gone to Hong Kong, New Zealand and northern Queensland. The company, headed by Mr Clifford and Sydney naval architect Philip Hercus, has almost completed its biggest contract, the 29-metre catamaran Spirit of Royland, destined for the Mackay-Brampton Island tourist trade. This morning, a crane had to be used to lift the superstructure onto the craft. Insufficient space prevented this task being completed in the Macquarie Wharf shed. The new boat, with a capacity for 250 passengers, will be launched on December the 3rd and undergo trials on the Derwent River.
This is the biggest one we've built in Tasmania. We have 2 of a similar size being built presently in Singapore, 2 slightly smaller ones in Hong Kong, 1 in New Zealand and 1 in Queensland, and we very shortly expect to have some more being built in America. Last year in Hobart we built $3 million worth of boats. Next year we intend to build something like the same figure. Unfortunately for the Tasmanian economy, we've built a similar value of boats in other places, which could well have been built in Tasmania if we had the facilities to do it. One of our major problems is the inefficiency of building large boats in a small shed. We've had to today lift the top superstructure onto the boat. That's been built separately and today is being added together out in the wind and weather, which is not very efficient. The whole operation is quite inefficient. We can't afford to be inefficient. If we are competing on a world market. Our Chinese and Singapore friends can quote very competitively, and we can't afford to be less efficient than they are.
The troubled Pershing 2 missile has made a successful test flight at its 3rd attempt. However, the missile's critics are still not happy, with some saying it's not reliable enough, and the anti-nuclear lobby is claiming the missile will give impetus to the arms race when it's deployed in Europe.
Number 1, it blew up only 17 seconds after launch. Test number 2, it didn't get off the ground because of battery failure. Test number 3, today. Computer problems caused a half-hour delay in the launch, raising fears of another failure. But the Pershing 2 finally flew successfully, 200 miles up and 66 miles downrange. When fully operational, it's supposed to be able to carry its nuclear warhead up to 1,000 miles. An Army spokesman's evaluation of today's test sounded like a sigh of relief.
We had a good flight today at a time when we very badly needed a good flight, and we're awfully happy.
Congressman Joseph Adabo, whose House subcommittee has cut production funds for the Pershing 2, was not impressed.
The farce of today was a minimal test. We don't know what took off, and it came down. Anything that goes up has to come down.
108 missiles are scheduled to be deployed by December of next year in West Germany. They'll be able to strike Soviet territory within 8 minutes after launch. The Russians have warned that once the Pershing 2 is deployed in Germany, they will take action to put American territory at comparable risk. But it was in response to the deployment of new Soviet SS-20 missiles that NATO decided to go ahead with the Pershing 2. Last year, huge anti-nuclear demonstrations dramatized the controversy sparked in Europe by the Pershing 2.
In Hobart, it's been suggested that a wages freeze be imposed for staff of the Royal Tasmanian Society for the Blind and Deaf. The Reverend Nat Somers, a member of the Society's Board of Management, told the annual meeting that the wages freeze was needed to stave off the possibility of reduced services to clients. The Reverend Somers said there'd be no increase this year in the state government's grant to the Blind and Deaf Society, and a tremendous effort would have to go into fundraising to meet commitments. 2 hectares of land and a resited ferry terminal have a special significance in a depressed area of southern Tasmania. They form a work and social centre for the unemployed youth of Risdon Vale, which has one of the highest unemployment rates among young people in the state. The centre is an example of the self-help principle promoted by the Community Youth Support Scheme. The centre is used for classes in schools such as woodwork, plumbing and sewing, with products made for sale. Project Officer Michael Cummins says there's a real need for the centre.
There's a level of 55% unemployed. 55% of the labour force are unemployed in the age group 15 to 24 in Risdon Vale, which is a staggering figure.
And what are you using the building for, the centre? What are you using the centre for?
Well, we're using the centre to run a variety of different programs aimed primarily at developing a range of skills so that the unemployed themselves have got a lot more self-confidence. They can then either compete better in the open job market, or they can look at, which we are doing, at developing some small-scale businesses here on the site.
In the United States, an escaped prisoner who took 7 hostages in a grocery store released his victims, then shot himself in the chest. Police allowed the man to talk to a television news crew in exchange for the release of some of the hostages. He told the crew he did not want to die an old man in prison.
Hours of negotiating with the man, the decision was made. He would get his television interview, but the person with the camera was to be a policeman. After some quick lessons on how to operate the camera, he went in and came out with this, an emotional but disjointed personal essay on prison life.
I can't go back to prison and die of an old man. So when I release these people tonight, it's going right here.
But police instructed members of the media not to use the tape. Yet. We don't want to roll the tape.
We will not roll the tape until he lets some people out.
It was to be the key to the release of the hostages. We readied ourselves before the camera, ready to go live. We were instructed to tell Joe Greer his taped interview would not be played unless he met the conditions set out by police. It's been a long night for all of us here. I'm sure you're tired, the hostages are tired, and we're tired, but we'll stay here. We'll stay here until you can release them, and we'll air your tape. Minutes later, one hostage was released, but when the others didn't follow, we were told to stop the tape. Finally, all of them fled to safety, and the rest of the tape was aired. Minutes later, police say a shot rang out, and they found him lying unconscious, suffering from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the chest.
Cricket. Western Australia looks set for a big first innings score in the Sheffield Shield match against Tasmania at Devonport. Western Australia was sent in to bat, and at stumps on the first day was 4 for 250. Kim Hughes scored 128, his second Shield century this season. The 4 wickets to fall were shared between Holding, Clough, Blizzard and Mansell. About 3,500 people watched the first day's play. In Argentina, there's increasing pressure for an inquiry into the disappearance of about 15,000 people following the discovery of mass graves near Buenos Aires. Argentine Nobel Peace Prize winner Adolfo Pérez Esquivel has joined the protest.
The Department of Justice is walking a tightrope about where to go over the 15,000 people who've disappeared. There's increasing international pressure for a full investigation on the one hand, while on the other, the military is saying that any future civilian government should treat it as a part of history. Over the last 2 months, hundreds of unmarked graves have been discovered near a military camp near Buenos Aires. Of particular concern are an estimated 100 children who are thought to have been with their parents when they were abducted. Their relatives believe they're being brought up by military families, but no one knows. The 1980 Nobel Prize winner, Argentina's Adolfo Esquivel, has joined the campaign for a full inquiry. His support has to some extent legitimized the campaign, which for years has been led by the relatives of those who've gone missing. Recently, for the first time, the campaigners have been allowed to protest publicly for a full inquiry, and their call is expected to be echoed in the near future by the United Nations. However, the military, who have a vested interest in keeping the matter as quiet as they can, will ensure that the answers will not come soon.
The Royal Navy Fleet Auxiliary Fort Grange could well be renamed Father Christmas for its latest voyage to the Falkland Islands. The ship has left Plymouth with presents and Christmas dinner for the troops.
It has been turned into a giant seagoing supermarket. Her holds can carry enough food to sustain 4,000 men for 4 months. But on this trip, extra space has been found to give the South Atlantic garrison Christmas cheer. In one of Fort Grange's cold stores, enough turkey to give everyone a traditional lunch, plus the trimmings, 100 tons of potatoes, 2 tons of sprouts, and 40 cases of stuffing. Special meals have also been provided for vegetarians. No one's forgotten for the Gurkhas, curry powder and special herbs and spices. Also on the inventory, the servicemen's favourite present to one another, deodorant. To wash all the food down, enough beer to stock 5 pubs for a month. Fort Grange will also be carrying a few surprises.
We contacted the British Forces Post Office last week and said that we were going down there, and if they had any parcel mail at all, we would be quite happy to take it. And when we sail, we will have 400 bags of parcel mail for the garrison and the ships, and I assume that most of it will be Christmas presents.
Fort Grange should arrive off the Falklands in 3 weeks' time. For the garrison, 7,000 miles away, should be a welcome sight.
Finally, the weather outlook. Winds will continue to ease tomorrow as a high-pressure ridge approaches from the west. Showers and drizzle in the west will therefore decrease a little, while other areas will remain fine. A strong wind warning continues for Tasmania's south coast, although a further slow moderation is expected. So to the forecast. Cool and cloudy about the west and south coasts, with scattered drizzle decreasing during the afternoon. Fine elsewhere with a mild day after a cool night and early morning. Moderate to fresh northwest to southwesterly winds easing a little. There'll be coastal sea breezes in the east. Good night.
Do you remember?
Continuing 8:55 Tuesday, H.E. Bates fair stood the win for France.
From the first moment I saw you.
And getting in here.
I remember.
Are you sure now?
A story of love and war. Fair stood the win for France continues 8:55 Tuesday on ABC.